Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools, and much more.
Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, our podcast for all things related to sustainable procurement. I'm Sean McCarthy, and one of the roles I have is to chair the Supply Chain Sustainability School in the UK. In June 2022, the school celebrated its 10th anniversary, and Jonathon Porritt, founder of Forum for the Future and all-round guru in the world of sustainability, helped us to launch the school 10 years ago. I interviewed Jonathon to get his perspective on where the construction industry was at the time, where he sees it today, and what the challenges are in the future. Jonathon never pulls punches. He never shies from controversy. So I do hope you enjoy this podcast and listening to Jonathon's views. Thank you. Jonathon, welcome. You helped us to launch the school 10 years ago in 2012 when we had 7 partners and we weren't quite sure what was going to happen. What was sustainability like in the sector and how do you see it now? How far have we come in 10 years?
It was still quite tentative in 2012. Let's be honest. I mean, there were people waking up to the nature of the challenge because there'd already been a lot of stuff going on. But it still hadn't really formed itself into a major challenge for the sector as a whole. So I can remember at the launch, there was a lot of quite concerned thoughts about, are we ever going to get enough suppliers to sign up to this?
Yeah.
Are we ever going to find enough partners to get involved? Yeah. Well, 10 years on, the answer to both of those questions has been answered. And happily, of course, it is all heading in the right direction. Yeah. So from that point of view, it's been a good decade. I'm sure we'll come on to the reasons why it hasn't been such a good decade as well. But, the progress has been quite substantial.
So, Jonathon, in what way have the last 10 years not been successful?
Yeah, well, I don't know how you see it, but honestly, the last 10 years from the perspective of the ways in which policy has been framed in this country to help the sector drive forward within the standards, the regulation, using the incentive schemes, all of that stuff has been nothing short of a disaster, a total disaster. And if I think back to where we were in 2012, with a relatively new government at that time, we still didn't realize that they were going to axe the Green Deal, that they were going to axe the Code for Sustainable Homes completely, because they'd already started to weaken it, but it would soon go. We didn't realize they were going to play fast and loose with the whole efficiency story in the built environment, as we've seen from one fiasco to the next, each one designed to fail more comprehensively than its predecessor. It's been a nightmare. 10 years has been a nightmare from a policy point of view. And pretty much everything that has happened because of the industry. Has happened because of what the sector has chosen to do to make happen itself. It shouldn't really be like that. It should be a much more strategic partnership between government and the sector.
Yeah, people often ask me about the school and the involvement of government. And I always say the school has been a great success because there was no involvement from government. This has always been an industry initiative. Started, as we say, with 7 partners, some industry funding from CITB. But the school now is self-sufficient financially, and I think it's important that we continue to do that. So looking forward then, how do you see the challenges over the next 10 years?
I think it's going to be very different. I really do. And I agree with you, obviously, that to have government involved in something like this would have been wrong, but we do need government involved in framing better standards. Just reflect on the irony that if we'd kept the Code for Sustainable Homes, every single new house in the UK from next year onwards would have been a zero carbon home. Yeah. Whereas we're now going to have to wait until X, who knows, until that moment arrives. So we have to have the regulatory framing for the market. And that drives the builders, the contractors, developers, which drives the supply chain. Yeah. So for me now, the government has wasted so much time that we're in catch-up mode. For the next decade, we're in full-on catch-up mode. And these pressures are going to translate through into supply chain partnerships, because to do what we have to do, I'm speaking now as a non-exec of Wilmot Dixon, to do what we have to do, we have to have our supply chain fully on board with what we're seeking to achieve in the net zero transition. And not just in terms of delivering what we say is the thing that we need delivered, but to share with us some of the innovation challenge that lies behind all of this. So the school is going to be right there, in my opinion, in the position to meet that growing demand. And it will become more and more important strategically for all the big players. And that in turn will change the performance of the industry, the sector as a whole.
So how do you see the school evolving? It's nice to hear that you think the school can be central in this campaign. What do we need to do? What's your challenge for the school for the next 10 years?
One of the things that is quite clear at the moment is that people are still not seeing carbon for what it really is, which is an absolutely critical part of any individual company's success story. They're still treating it as some kind of environmental add-on to the serious financial business they're involved in. And if we had a proper price on every ton of carbon, say every ton of carbon across the entire built environment came in at £100 a ton, then all of those people who currently treat carbon as a bit of an afterthought, if we're lucky, so the estimators, the quantity surveyors, the accountants, the occasional chief finance officer, who doesn't quite get it yet, happily not the case with us, but in any of those circumstances, they would then begin to realize that this is a completely material factor in financial success. And that in turn will increase the level of expectation from the supply chain. And that in turn will increase the demand on the school to enable more and more of the suppliers in the sector to see the strategic importance of this. So that, I suspect, will mean a range of new products that you'll need to bring forward, different ways of helping the supply chain understand what this looks like. It's quite hard work sometimes at the moment, getting people to do anything other than tick a box. And I hope that the school will contribute to something which is really important, which is to get what remains quite a large number of companies in our sector out of the blah, blah, blah bit and into the serious delivery bit. There are far too many people in our sector who are still out there doing the talk and absolutely not doing the walk.
So, Jonathon, how do you see the school playing a pivotal role in these challenges over the next 10 years?
I don't think there's any doubt that the school is going to be playing an absolutely critical role over the next 10 years. That's partly because the demand is building. People are beginning to understand just how significant this is. And partly because we are definitely in catch-up mode. There's been so much wasted time, failed initiatives, misunderstandings about the nature of sustainable procurement, for instance, and how best to work in partnership across the supply chain. All of that stuff, just so many wasted opportunities. So we've now got an opportunity, and I hope a government that's going to be rather more smart, let's describe it as that, in the future than it has been in the past, to help deliver that kind of strategic approach.
So in terms of supply chains, we talked for many years about sustainable procurement, obviously. How do you see managing supply chains? You said that it's essential to take the supply chains with us. Do you see the way that the major tier ones, contractors and clients, managing their supply chains in a different way in order to achieve this?
If I think about it from the point of view of Wilmot Dixon, we've always had good relationships with our suppliers, tier one suppliers in particular, but we haven't had a chance to partner with them in more creative ways. And what I think we're going to be looking for in the future is not just an ability on their part to deliver against the standards that will be set for the sector as a whole, we are going to drive them to anyway, but to be much more engaged in a kind of co-creation model. There's a lot of innovation that's going to have to come forward over the course of the next decade to deliver what we need, which is essentially a net zero built environment by 2035. And people talk about 2050 as if that was sort of some distant possibility. We're going to have to drive things a lot faster than that. And we can't do that without the more creative engagement with our suppliers.
Because I guess the construction industry in the main still has this kind of vertical supply chain with their master-slave relationships all the way down. And I think we see some innovation from some clients doing things very differently. Do you see that as the future, more networks of suppliers rather than a vertical supply chain and risk sharing and working together to draw out that innovation?
In a way, the sector is driven so much by value engineered relationships between the big players and the small players. And I look at that sometimes and I just think, I don't believe that's ever going to create the conditions for a much more creative approach, risk sharing, as you said, but also a different way of looking at innovation. And for us, this is going to become a much bigger priority. We can't do what we need to do without changing a lot of things. Procurement practices, materials, construction techniques, offsite manufacturing, the list goes on and on. And we on our own can't deliver that. We have to deliver that together with our suppliers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.